Hola, doncs avui acabem amb aquesta xerrada que és un plaer amb el nostre actual Premi Pepe Carvalho, Mick Herron, que demana un aplaudiment absolutament entusiasta. Us volem agrair, com sempre,
thank you very much for choosing us. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your love and care. And thanks for your understanding when things do not flow. Apologies. After the debate, we'll screen 2 chapters of Slow Horse based on Mick's novels. Tomorrow we'll kick off at 10. There are some no-shows as a result of, the terrible situation in the railway service in Catalonia. Some people were coming from places such as Zaragoza, the other end of the world, or even Madrid, these places so far away, like in the middle of nowhere. No train connection. Oh, all right. So as you might know, one of them is not English. You'll have to choose who is not the English one in the room, right? So we have Juan Galindo, who is an expert in the topic. He's a super fan of Mick. He's also a writer, but this year he's been invited as a journalist. So enjoy the debate. See you tomorrow. If you want to stay to the screening of the series, you are most welcome to stay. Thank you. So first of all, good afternoon, good evening, and thanks for coming. One sometimes has the privilege of attaining one's professional dreams. And one of my dreams, as a crazy of thriller and noir, was to spend a few minutes in this festival with Mick. So, mission accomplished. Thanks, Commissioner, and thanks. Off we go. The idea is discovering the author behind Slow Horses, but not only. We also want to dig into the amazing team under the skin of the creator of The Sacred Hours, his perhaps most recent book translated into Spanish, published by Sala. And the story behind The Sacred Hours is about espionage, ambience in the 90s Berlin, and the disenchanted UK of the present. If you haven't read it, you have a plan for the weekend. So don't be afraid, because even if you haven't read one single page of the author, you can read it. No spoiler. But if you come from Slow Horses, you'll just be amazed. Because, the author to my right is a musician. He speaks about the deepest part in humankind, spies, but also loyalty, truth, love, honor, amongst many other topics, without forgetting the importance of stealing a smile from his readers. This is magic. As you know, he became famous with Slow Horses, the first novel of a series with the same title, and with the same title in its adaptation to the larger screen, to the big screen. Sala has published 5 of the Slow Horses. If you haven't read it, let me give you a hint. The main characters are a band of losers led by Jackson Lamb. And I'm not exaggerating, he is amongst the best characters in the history of recent literature. I am not exaggerating, this is the way it is. And they are, always getting in trouble, far beyond their possibilities, but there is Herron to pull the threads and manipulate them with no problem. And again, as a result of the series, we had a TV series. If you haven't seen it, you have a second plan for the weekend, so we'll keep you busy. But please, first wait for the BCNegra to be finished, otherwise I'll be accused of sending you home before the festival is over. So the series is not exclusive of the novel and vice versa. They are so beautifully shaped that they are complementary, and this is absolutely marvelous. If you have seen the series, you can ground on the book and vice versa. So these are the topics we will be discussing. We'll be raising. The interview will be in English, so Mick does not have to follow the translation, and things flow more naturally. So off we go in English.
Thank you, Mr. Herron, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your award.
Thank you. I was absolutely thrilled.
Let's start from the beginning, okay?
Sure.
You grew up in Newcastle, right? In a Catholic family.
We're going right back to the beginning.
Yeah, right. How did influence your early years on you as a writer?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I think the biggest influence on my early years as a writer was simply that I was a reader through all that time. And those of you who know England, those of you who know Newcastle upon Tyne, do we have any people from Newcastle in the audience?
No.
I didn't think so. It has a very strong identity, local, regional identity. I was talking to somebody just now who spent a few years in Gateshead, so he knows what I'm talking about. The Geordie character is very strong. The dialect that they speak is very strong. But I don't know that that's particularly had a bearing on the writer that I grew up into. I think that most of my influences are from the written word, are from the page. I was a reader from a very young age, and that's really what shaped me as a writer now.
Which kind of authors or literature? Everything?
Everything I could get my hands on. I think that, like a lot of writers, I was a narrative addict, a story junkie from a very early age, and I would read everything that I could get my hands on. So I was reading a lot of appropriate stories, children's stories, fairy tales and so on from very small. And as I got older, I started reading adult fiction rather younger than most people do, I suppose. For me, I think the bridge between children's fiction and adult fiction was probably Agatha Christie, the mystery writer, which is true for many people who read English, not just writers, but she was a kind of bridge between children's books and grown-up books for many, many people. But during my teenage years, I read a lot of American fiction as well. John Steinbeck, Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, people like that. And then went on to study English literature at university. So I've been a reader all my life, and reading I'm a reader before I'm a writer, really.
If you had to choose writing or reading?
I'd probably have to kill you if you made me choose between the two. But I would be a reader, I think. I mean, I would be wounded for the rest of my life, but I would be a reader first.
Your books have been a runaway hit, but at the beginning it wasn't like that. Then one day, how did it happen?
One day took about 7 years. Yeah, it was a very long day. Yeah, I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. It was 7 years from Slow Horses, which itself was my 6th novel. So my career was very slow burn one. And I'm glad it happened that way, because it meant that by the time success arrived and by the time I had a readership, I was very well established in my own mind as the kind of writer that I am and the kind of writer that I want to be. So I wasn't influenced by success. I wasn't trying to chase after, the hit that I just had or anything like that. I was able to just write what I wanted to write, and I've continued to do that ever since.
If we went backwards to 2003, what would you say to yourself?
Hang on in there. I would say that you're not going to believe what's going to happen, but also you're not going to believe how long it's going to take. But I wouldn't have done anything any differently.
It is true that you imagined another ending for the Slow Horses, for the first novel, a very tragic one.
Yes, I don't know about very tragic, but it was different. My plan was, it was never going to be a series. I was writing one book, and then I was going to go back to my series. I was writing a series of novels about an Oxford private detective called Zoe Bone. And Slow Horses was me taking time off from that to do something a bit different. And the ending of it, when I started writing the book, the ending that I imagined for it was that I was going to destroy it. I was going to blow Slough House up or something similar. and just destroy the whole premise that I'd created, and have some of the characters going off on the run, essentially, and just leave them there, have them leaving the country and going into hiding. And I thought that would be quite a nice way to end a book. But as I got nearer the end, I just realised that I was going to want to stay there. I liked Slough House. I thought I'd built myself a home and I was going to move in. And I've been there ever since, one way or the other. So I'm glad I changed my mind about that. None of you would be here if I... I wouldn't be here.
For those who haven't read the Slow Horses series yet, how would you explain what Slough House is?
Slough House is an imaginary department of the British Intelligence Service where they send people who've messed up, who have damaged their own careers, either because of an internal flaw or failing, or an addiction, or because they've annoyed the wrong person, or because they've really messed up a job that they were on. It is, while I was starting to write these books, I was a sub-editor on an employment law journal. And one thing that became very apparent to me from this work was that it can be very difficult to sack people, especially if they're civil servants. Now,
even if they're spies.
Well, that's the flaw in the premise, you see, because in actual fact, all these laws tend to have exceptions for the intelligence service. So it doesn't really work, but it sounds plausible, and I've got this far on it, so stop spoiling it for everybody. The idea was that instead of being able to sack them, they would put all these failures into a single department and make their lives miserable so that they would quit of their own accord, which is why they have a boss who is very, very unpleasant to his staff. But of course, the people who wanted to be spies, they all imagined that their destiny was to be James Bond. So they're not going to give up that easily. So they all hang on in the hope that they will find some kind of redemption. A nicer author would have given them redemption by now. I am not that man. So they are still there. A while ago, I met a very senior member of the British Intelligence Service. It was a social occasion over dinner, and it wasn't me actually, it was my partner Jo. She asked him at one point, what would happen if one of your agents left a classified document on a tube train, which is something that happens in the book. One of the people who's in Slough House left, I think it was a CD rather than a file, left a CD full of classified information on an underground train. And that's why he ends up in Slough House. And Jo asked this guy, who was very senior, what would happen in real life to that spy. And he said, oh, we'd be fired. No problem. So, yeah, Slough House couldn't really happen, but I've got this far on it.
Tell the readers something about Jackson Lamb. What a guy.
Jackson, well, because the premise is that these people are there to be made to feel miserable, to be made unhappy, it was necessary that their boss, the man who's in charge of them all, treated them very badly. So that's how Jackson came into being. But as soon as I started writing him, I realised that I could have a lot of fun with a character whose role is simply to be as nasty as possible, to as many people as possible, all the time. So he's a very unfiltered person. He says things which probably shouldn't be said in public, certainly shouldn't be said in the workplace. But when I write, I tend to go into the minds of my characters. I write with interiority, which is something that most, if not all, novelists do. So when I'm writing a scene, you tend to know what the character I'm writing about is thinking and feeling. But not Lamb. I never go inside Jackson Lamb's head. Because if the reader knew what he was thinking or feeling, they would know either that he means everything that he says, in which case he would be completely intolerable, or he doesn't mean it, in which case he would cease to be any kind of danger. So I keep him at arm's length for that reason. And I think that the discerning reader will recognise that a lot of his behaviour comes from self-loathing. He's damaged in some way, which I've never revealed, partly because I don't really know, but it allows readers to speculate about him.
What are London rules?
London rules. London rules, which I sort of made up, but you can see evidence of them everywhere you look. I borrowed it from John le Carré. He had Moscow rules. Moscow rules in le Carré's world is everywhere, when you treat somewhere like it's enemy territory, when you think you're being watched, you behave with great care, great caution. Those are Moscow rules. Moscow rules is watch your back. London rules is cover your ass, which essentially means whatever goes on, make sure you don't get the blame for it. Now, I came up with that and it's in the very first book, in fact, and I made it the title of a book in 2016. And every time I pick up a newspaper and read about British politics, certainly I can find examples of it every single day.
Talking about making things up, to what extent do you use your imagination to create the world of MI5, MI6, depending on?
In creating the intelligence service world, as I see it, it's all made up. It's all imagination. I don't think there's any overlap between reality and Slough House. As I've said, I don't think Slough House could really exist. When I've met actual spies, which I have done a few times over the past few years, it's the only audience where I never get asked, have you ever been a spy? Because they know that I haven't. And they quite like that. They like it that entertainment can be made out of the world that they operate in without it infringing on the actual reality. Nobody's going to think that they're finding out great secrets when they read my books. It's all...
Do you have any source inside the Secret Service?
Any friends inside the Secret Service?
Friends and sources.
People I have met, I never go to them for information or to check plots with them or anything like that. No, I treat them with great respect. Despite what I write about them in my books, I treat them with great respect.
Let's talk about the TV show. Then we will back to the novels. I really like the TV show, especially Gary Oldman as Jackson Lamb. But I have a problem now when I see, for example, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I don't see George Smiley anymore. I see Jackson Lamb because he's so blended into the character. That I see him everywhere. And when I read in your books, I'm imagining Jackson Lamb as Gary Oldman. So when you are writing, do you have in your mind the Gary Oldman characterization? Right?
I'm glad to say that I don't. I admire the performance tremendously. He's doing a wonderful job. But I've never had really a visual imagination. When I'm writing, I'm working with words on the page. I'm not having pictures in my head that I'm trying to describe. I'm dealing with vocabulary and so on. So Gary's image doesn't enter into it. When I'm kind of editing my work, when I'm going over it, I can quite happily imagine Gary saying the lines, and I'm fine with that because he's doing a great job. But I think that what Gary's done is he's created a slightly different version of Jackson Lamb, and he's very respectful about the material, and he's talked to me about it a number of times, and he will ask. He got in touch not that long ago to say, there's this line in the script, do you really think Jackson would say this? And because he wasn't entirely sure. So we talk about things like that all the time. But the version of Jackson that he's come up with is one that's in a way it's partly influenced by the fact that he played George Smiley, because he's often said that he sees Lamb as being a version, what George Smiley could have been if he'd made a few poor decisions somewhere along the way. And Gary's thought about Lamb more than anybody else except me. So I think he's got a right to be creating his own version. And my character just exists on the page and in the imaginations of my readers. Gary's up there on a screen to be seen. So it's, you know, they're two very different things.
Both versions are really disgusting, guys.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. To what extent were you involved on the TV show?
I talked to them a lot. I've been in the writer's room. I'm not there all the time, but I'm there in the beginning, the early process. The process of adaptation, when you've got a novel which you're turning into a TV show or a movie, is mostly a matter of problem solving. I talked about interiority before. When you're a writer, you're being inside a character's head. Now you can't, on a page you can say, you know, the character is thinking this, the character is feeling this. On a screen, you've got to convey that information in a different form. You have to let the viewer know what's going on without simply telling them. You've got to show them. So a lot of the adaptation process is solving problems like that. How do we convey this information to the viewer? And also there are other things that come into play. If you've got Gary Oldman in a part, you want him on screen as much as possible. Now Jackson isn't on every page of the book by any means. No. There's one book he doesn't turn up till about page 70. Nobody who is paying Gary Oldman enormous amounts of money wants him off screen for more than 5 minutes at a time. So a lot of the plot has to be rejigged in order to allow more screen time for particular actors. That kind of thing. It's all great fun to do. I mean, I'm very happy to go along with it. So I'm there when that sort of thing is being talked about, and I try to solve some problems, and I make some things worse, and then I go away and the writers write the scripts.
What about the other TV show, the one that is the adaptation of Down the Cemetery Road?
Down Cemetery Road. That's much more recent. Series 1 showed just last year, and that was based on a novel that I was writing in the 1990s. So it was my first published book. It's published in 2003, but I'd finished writing it some years before then. So it's historical fiction now, even though it wasn't intended to be at the time. So there were lots of things that needed to be changed when adapting that, because nobody has a mobile telephone in that book for the first start. And it's set in the modern world, it's set in the contemporary world, so obviously they do have various bits of technology which weren't around at the time. So that had to be rejigged a lot. But there was the lead writer on that was a writer on Slow Horses, Morwenna Banks. So she's become a very good friend, and also she was somebody who I could completely trust with the material. So she did a lovely job of it, I think. We've got Emma Thompson and Ruth Wilson playing the lead roles, and they are wonderful. So that was great fun. In a way, in many ways, I enjoy it more than the experience of watching Slow Horses on screen, because
why?
That, between the very first meeting I had with the producer of Slow Horses and seeing it on screen, was a little over 8 years. So by the time it arrived, I kind of knew. I'd been waiting for quite a long time. It had been buzzing away in the background for years. Whereas Down Cemetery Road, because of the success of Slow Horses, was a much swifter process. The distance between being told, okay, this is going to happen, and seeing it was only about 2 years. So it just felt, fresher and still kind of unexpected to me when I saw it. So I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Let's go back to the novels. I think we could say that every one of your novels is a masterpiece in terms of plotting and the use of lots of characters.
I'm very happy for you to call them masterpieces. I wouldn't do it myself.
I want you to tell us your secret. How do you do it?
I just make it all up. I don't know. I mean, writing a novel is a matter of absolute commitment, I think. You have to treat every paragraph, every sentence, as if it were the main reason for writing the book. I don't write to deadlines because I know a lot of friends who are writers like deadlines because they think that's the only way they get the work done. It's like they've got something hanging over their heads. They know they will, finish the book because they have to by a certain date. But I think a deadline makes you focus on the end, and I think you should only focus on the end when you're writing the end. all the way through the book, you need to think, I suppose, that if somebody picked up your book off a shelf in a bookshop and opened it at random and read a sentence, would they think, oh, I like that, I'm going to buy the book? So you've got to be at that level all the way through, and that affects the way you kind of edit and rewrite stuff as well as the original.
Every sentence counts.
Every sentence counts. It has to be up there at the top of your game as much as it's possible to be so. So that's the approach I take. I don't really enjoy finishing books. I like being right in the middle of a book, because that way I know what I'm doing tomorrow, and I know that I'm for as far as I can see into the future, this is what I'm going to be doing, and I feel quite relaxed about that. Writing the end of a book it's anxiety inducing, because then you start thinking, well, somebody's going to read this soon, and then they're going to tell me whether it's any good or not, and that's quite anxious making. Up until I finished a book, I don't tell anybody what it's about. I don't even tell my publisher the title until the last.
Don't even Joe, nobody.
Not even Jo, no. She's the first to read the books and the first to know the title, but generally speaking, it's not until I've finished.
Do you consider yourself as a thorough writer in terms of planification, or?
Sorry, I missed that.
A thorough writer. Do you make a lot of planification before starting?
No, not really. I generally have an idea of where I'm going, and I have an idea of the end. And Slow Horses was the only book where I really did massively change the ending by the time I got there. But often I find that what I thought was the end, I'm in fact only about halfway through, and that leaves me with everything else to go. I think that books work best for me when they're allowed kind of organic growth. If I planned it too much before starting, then writing it would become a chore. I worry. I think that's how it would happen. So I like to discover quite a lot along the way. And also, I'm not capable of doing that kind of planning, I find. I can only think about a book so much before I have to start writing it. Once I start writing it, ideas come and so on, but in the abstract, just sitting in a chair staring at the ceiling, I can get a little way, but I have to be working with the characters. They have to be on the page. They have to be talking to each other. That's where I can see where I'm going and see where they're going, and it becomes much clearer.
What are you writing now?
A book.
Okay. A book about?
It's about spies, Juan Carlos.
Again.
It's not a Slow House novel. No.
Okay. It's an standalone.
It's a novel, yeah.
Okay, good. In your novels, you capture the anger and frustration felt by many people in your country and in Europe in general. How do you find balance between that social point of view and the needs of the thriller?
I trust intuition, really, and hope that I get the balance right, in the same way that I balance having humour in the books, in the way that the characters talk to each other, and bad things happening. And I just keep my fingers crossed that it all works out fine. I'm writing thrillers, you're quite right, but at the same time I do want a lot of the time to make comments about the political situation, certainly in my country. And a lot of the things that are causing damage in my country are doing the same thing in Europe, and even more so in the United States right now. So these are all issues that we're all dealing with and living with every day. It would be wrong, I think, to write a book in which the characters seem completely oblivious to these things, because most thinking people are worried now.
Yeah.
I think.
Was humor always there?
Yes. I felt that with Slow Horses, the humour in that book was an appropriate way of telling that particular story. I'm dealing with people who are frustrated and disappointed, and who have been made to feel like failures, and who are working in a dismal office block for somebody who apparently hates them and makes their lives miserable. That sounds great, doesn't it? Doesn't everybody want to read that book? So I thought, well, we need something to provide entertainment, really. But also, I think people who are at that level do rely on humour. It's a defence mechanism. I think once you run out of jokes to tell, you know, if you're in a bad situation and you can no longer find anything amusing about it, then you're at rock bottom. That's a really bad place to be. So they're not quite there yet. And I think that the black humour with which they address each other and contemplate their situation is their own way of trying to make their situations better, or at least bearable. I'm making this sound great, aren't they? It's not that.
Yeah, it sounds good. But your characters are usually a bunch of underdogs, but they win over the real dogs.
Sometimes.
How?
Yeah. Usually through quite farcical measures, I have to say. I write about mistakes being made a lot of the time because I'm interested in bureaucracy and administration and how organisations get things wrong. And it's largely down to people making poor choices, you know, people in management making poor choices, people making decisions that are based on self-interest rather than for the best of the situation that they're in. I rely on politics a lot for that, obviously. And when the slow horses find themselves in that kind of situation where bad things are happening because of bad decisions that have been made elsewhere, they are trying, you know, they're trying their best, they're trying to do well, and ultimately they do have Jackson Lamb on their side. Now, despite the fact that he's an unpleasant person, he's a very clever person, and he generally knows what's going on before anybody else does. So without his assistance, his guidance, and even his encouragement, in a way, I don't think that they would get very far.
Yeah, he's dangerous too. At least more dangerous than it seems to be.
He is, and I mean, the most recent book hasn't been translated into Spanish yet, but he's pretty dangerous in the new book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Without spoiling anything about the white horse, the slow horses series, some of the characters we could say that suffer a tragic destiny. Mm-hmm. How do you feel? How difficult was to treat them in that way?
It is difficult. I felt that it would be untrue to the situation that I created to have the characters be safe all the time. If I'm going to write about danger, then I've got to show that that danger is real. So yes, I do have characters who die in the course of the novels, people who've been around for a few books. Readers, on the whole, don't expect this to happen to people they think of as being the heroes of a novel series. So you don't have to kill very many people before readers start getting nervous. You don't have to kill many characters before the characters start getting nervous. They realise that, you know, when they're in a dangerous situation, they may not be getting out of it. I don't take it lightly, though. I don't believe that my characters are real. You know, I don't have conversations with them in my head or anything like that. But I do know that when I'm writing a character, I'm trying to make them as individual as possible. So if I kill a character, it means that I no longer have access to the voice that I created for them. And I do miss that. There are characters I do miss for that reason. I can no longer rely on them to do whatever it is that they used to do before I callously killed them off. But it also allows me to introduce new characters as well, to have a kind of revolving door policy, as it were. I think I would probably start getting quite tired of writing a book if it only had the same characters in over and over again. I think that would require quite a lot of effort. But this allows me to refresh every so often. Another of the big flaws in my series, as I see it though, is that I think any large organisation, if you had a department specifically for those who weren't very good at their job, that would quickly become the largest department of the whole organisation. So I don't think there are enough people in Slough House, really. But I couldn't cope with writing a book with 100 characters in.
I think that The Secret Hours is one of your finest novels, but I'm curious about what pushed you to write a standalone novel in the middle of the huge success that you were enjoying with Slow Horses.
It's always nice to do something a bit different and to step aside from a series, and that was certainly my intention when I started writing The Secret Hours. Excuse me, sorry about that. Shh. But when I started writing it, all I had really was the first chapter, which is about a man called Max, who is in his cottage in Devon. It's a very rural area of the UK. And his cottage is attacked in the middle of the night by unknown assailants. And I knew that there was obviously going to have to be a reason for that. Something that was part of his past. He's a man in his late 60s. But I didn't at that point know what it was. I really started with the first sentence on this book. My brother lives in Devon. I borrowed his cottage, the cottage where he lives with his wife, for that chapter. And we were there a few years ago, staying with him, out for a walk. And he said to me, "The worst smell in the world is a dead badger." And he knew this because he'd smelled one. And I thought, that's great. That's my opening sentence. I'm having my next novel. So that's what I started with, and it came from there. But the other idea I'd had at the time was to write about, again, it's about bureaucracy and organisation and institutions, to write about two civil servants who are tasked with compiling a report on the misdeeds of the Secret Service. But right from the start, they're foiled by the head of the Secret Service, who arranges things so that these people are trying to write their report without having any access whatsoever to any of the documents that they need. So they're basically sitting in an office for years, 2 years, without getting anything done. And they hate each other. I always enjoy writing about people sitting in offices hating each other. I don't know where I get my ideas from. But then I thought, well, they're obviously going to have access to some secrets at some point. So they come into possession of a classified file, which is left with them. And I knew that this file was going to involve the guy, Max, in his cottage. So I took it step by step, really. And then I thought, I'm going to go back to Berlin with this. The heart of the Cold War. I mean, for anyone my age anyway, the spy novel is really about the Cold War. That's where the heart of it is. Younger writers now are dealing with much broader issues. There's the Middle East, there's stuff going on in Ukraine. All sorts of things are happening in the world that spy writers are coping with. But for my generation, the Cold War is where all the classic fiction comes from. And Berlin, of course, is the heart of the Cold War, when the war was there, and even afterwards. So I thought, this is the time that if I pretend to be a spy writer, I'm going to do it properly. I'm going to write a novel, part of it set in Berlin at that time. And I had told everybody that I was writing a standalone because this was, my time off from the series. And I never tell people much more than that anyway. But I thought, as I started to write, what would be fun? What would be fun is if I started to bring some of the other characters that I write about, show them what they were like when they were in Berlin. But I wasn't going to use their names. So several times during the novel, I say that when these civil servants are interviewing people, they say, because of this particular rule, this regulation, we can only refer to these people by the names they were operating under at the time we're talking about. So all the characters who appear in the novel, who have appeared in the Slow Horses books, they're called by different names, and the reader has to work out who they are. It's not that tricky, I have to tell you. But that was great fun for me. So I delivered it to the publisher without telling them that actually this has got a lot of backstory in it for the Slough House series, and I just let them, as I like readers to do, to find that out.
Yeah, it was great fun when I found out that.
I'm glad, because it felt like great fun to me writing it. So I was hoping that readers would have that same experience.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of a part of Slow Horses world, or it's not the series, but it's anyway,
it is. I mean, it does stand alone as a novel, but if you read the other books, I think there's fun to be had there.
That's right. Let me see. Okay. In The Secret Hours, one of the main characters is Alison North. She says something that is quite good. She says, "There will always be betrayals, always be damage, and some of that will be to your own side. A successful spy has to love the enemy." Wow.
You're not the first person to quote that of me lately. Yes, I've been thinking about that a lot lately as well. I mean, spy novels are really all about betrayal. And you can't betray somebody unless you first have some kind of connection with them. It's about people betraying their country, obviously, and therefore choosing another side to devote their loyalty to. Some people do it just for money, obviously, but I'm less interested in that sort of person. I have the feeling that if you were a spy at the height of the Cold War, say, at that time, you would have more in common with the people you were spying on, you were working with in that sense, than you would with the people back home who didn't really know what was going on. I mean, you were essentially, your job, the life that you're living as an agent of the state, is protecting your home country. But the people back in the home country don't know anything about you or what you're doing, whereas the people that you're spying on know you're there, and you have there's more of a bond there, I suspect. I don't know how true this is, but it certainly sounded like a good thing to put in a book.
That's interesting. Do you think a lot about spies?
It's necessary to do so because of the books. Yeah. If I weren't writing books about them, I'm not sure I'd spend a lot of time contemplating them. No.
Let me read you another sentence. This is by John le Carré. He said, "It wasn't the spies who won the Cold War. I don't believe that in the end the spies mattered very much at all." Do you agree?
I think that might well be true, yes. I mean, it certainly gave them something to do. There's a theory that everybody's seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones film. If Indiana Jones wasn't in that film, everything would still work out the same way in the end. He doesn't really do anything. I mean, he does a lot of running around, but the essential plot happens regardless.
That's true.
The Nazis get the Ark, they open it, So he didn't have to be there, and maybe it's true with spies. That all would have happened anyway. The end of the Cold War, I mean.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to finish. So thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Mick Herron, thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Are you doing questions from the audience?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bueno, y ahora firmará, por supuesto, todos los libros que hagan falta. Gracias.